Dear students, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. Welcome in this session. We are discussing neoclassical realism these days. Neoclassical realism focuses on intervening variables, and in the last session, we discussed these intervening variables. Today, our discussion is based on a book. Its title is New Classical Realist Theory of International Politics. Its authors are Norrin M. Ripsman, Jeffrey W. Taliaferro, and Stephen E. Lobel. The book is published from Oxford University Press. It was published in 2016. Today we will discuss leader images. Leader images. The first set of intervening variables is about the beliefs or images of individual decision makers. Beliefs are images of individual decision makers. In fact, it is a lot about political psychology. In today's session, we will also study political psychology. It is a very, very important, very interesting topic. Leader images. It is the first set of intervening variables, and it is about the beliefs or images of individual decision makers, individual leaders. These decision makers sit at the head of the state, sit at the top of the state, top leadership. We call these individuals the foreign policy executive. What do we call them? Foreign Policy Executive, FPE, Foreign Policy Executive. The FPE includes the president, prime minister, or a dictator. So they are the foreign policy executives. They mainly they mainly shape and design the foreign policy of the state. That is why they are called foreign policy executives. It also includes key cabinet members, senior ministers, cabinet members, and ministers and advisors. These are the people in charge of foreign and defense policies. The foreign policy executive often has private information that others do not have. They are the insiders, and they have very sensitive information with them, which common people do not have. They also have a monopoly on intelligence about foreign countries. Intelligence about foreign countries. This makes them the most important actors to focus on. They are the most important actors when we try to understand the foreign policy of a state. We look at them when we want to explain foreign policy and grand strategic adjustment. We look at them, we try to understand them, those foreign policy executives, those leaders, when we want to explain foreign policy and when we want to explain grand strategic adjustment. Grand strategic adjustments. Leader images matter because they affect the first of three critical processes. Leader images matter because they affect the first of three critical processes. That process is the perception of incoming systemic stimuli. Okay? Incoming systemic stimuli, that is the input. That is the first process of foreign policy making. And in the second process, foreign policy is actually made. And in the third process, the foreign policy is implemented. it is executed. So these are the three processes of foreign policy. Stimuli, external stimuli are input, then foreign policy making, then its implementation or execution. So leader images matter because they affect the first of three critical processes. So first critical process is stimulus for making a policy, for making foreign policy or input. At that stage, leader images, perceptions of the leaders and beliefs of the leaders, they play a very important role. And how do they react? How do they respond to the stimulus? Stimulus, any accident, any international event can be a stimulus. For example, 9/11 event, it was a stimulus. Or in our neighborhood, a war started. America and Israel invaded Iran. Our country, our leadership in Pakistan, they responded to it. How did they respond to it? Their beliefs and images, they played a part in it. Okay, that process is the perception of incoming systemic international system. Stimulus comes from the international system. India, for example, threatens Pakistan. It is a stimulus. How we will respond to that stimulus? Okay. So this is how foreign policy is changed, foreign policy is made, foreign policy is redesigned. In that process, the perceptions of leaders, the beliefs of the leaders, political beliefs of the leaders, political perceptions of the leaders, they play a key role in how the state will respond to the external stimulus, how the foreign policy executive will respond. Psychological models help us understand how leaders process information. The information that comes, people, political actors process that information. We, the citizens, we also process it. Leaders also process the information which is coming to them. These models look at crisis situations, crisis, particularly when there is a crisis, there is war-like situation, there is conflict. So in that at that stage, in that moment, perceptions and beliefs become more important. In a crisis, information is often incomplete. When there is a crisis, information is often incomplete, overwhelming, or contradictory. These are the problems with the information that comes. These models focus on cognitive explanations. Cognitive explanations. Cognitive relates to our understanding of something. That is called cognition. Cognitive explanations means explanation which are based on our understanding. How do we understand the phenomenon? How do we understand something? That is called cognitive explanation. Cognitive explanations include operational codes. Operational codes. It is another a tough term, hard term. We explain it further. What is operational code? This detail is coming. Operational codes include the fundamental attribution error. Fundamental attribution error. Who did what? We attribute to something. Okay. For example, India said there was an attack in Pahalgam. India blamed Pakistan. They said cross-border elements are responsible for the attack in Pahalgam. Okay, so it can be an attribution error. It can be an attribution error. They attributed the attack to the people in Pakistan. groups in Pakistan, but it can be an error. They attributed to it. So it is called attribution error. They include lessons from history, code, operational codes. They include the role of personality. Operational codes also include the role of personality. Operational codes include group dynamics and group think. Group dynamics. For example, executive is a group, parliament is a group, can be taken as a group. There are other groups in society as well. Okay, your class can be taken as a group. Fine. There are different interest groups, associations. They also work like groups. They include group dynamics, dynamics of groups. How do groups function? How do groups work? How do they pursue their agenda? Okay, it is called group dynamics. How do people join groups? Why people leave the groups? These are different dynamics of groups. They include operational codes, include group dynamics and group think. Group think. It is another important term. Certain groups think in a certain way. If you join a group and there is a certain way of thinking on a particular issue in that group, you may feel compelled to think on the same line. You may feel forced to comply with the overall attitude, overall understanding that is found in that group. If you do not agree with them, still you may feel that it will not be accepted, and you repress your understanding, your feelings, because disagreeing openly with them uh, may lead to some trouble, or you may have to leave the group. So generally people want to stay in the group, and generally they toe the same line which exists on a certain point. It is called group think. It is called group think. Just imagine, after the incident of Pahalgam, Narendra Modi and some of his ministers, they wanted to attack Pakistan. Maybe it is possible that one or two ministers, cabinet members of Narendra Modi, they did not want to attack Pakistan. But since they were the members of that group, that is the executive, the cabinet of Narendra Modi, and they felt, although it is not appropriate to attack Pakistan, but since the Prime Minister and his senior ministers, his close members of the cabinet, they have decided to attack, so they kept quiet. They might have kept quiet. It is called groupthink. It is called groupthink. They did not go openly against their decision. So it happens in the groups. And they include the beliefs and images of leaders, political beliefs, political images of leaders. What is image? For example, all of us sitting here, we have an image of Narendra Modi, what kind of person he is. All of us have an image of Donald Trump, what kind of leader he is. All of us have an image of Imran Khan, Nawaz Sharif, President Zardari, all of us in our mind. Do you agree? Do you understand this?
Yes, sir.
We have an image, and that image is important when we try to understand their decisions, their political behavior. That image is important. So, leaders, they also have images, images of themselves and images of other leaders, images of other states. They are important. They influence how different leaders make decisions, how different leaders make foreign policy. So those images are also important. Political beliefs are also important. And the information that is coming, that is also important. And how we shift that information, how we process that information, that is also important. To begin with, all people have a set of core values. All people have a set of core values, core beliefs, and core images. These guide how they interact with and understand the outside world. These core values, core beliefs, they guide how they interact with and how they understand the outside world. So, core values, core beliefs, core images, all of them influence. These images are highly personalized. Images are highly personalized. They are shaped by the individual's past experiences and values. These images are shaped by the individual's past experiences and there is a typing mistake here. There is a semicolon instead of the apostrophe. Because they represent core beliefs, they are not easily changed. These images do not easily change. Once they are formed, they act as cognitive filters. They act as cognitive filters. These filters decide what leaders pay attention to. These filters decide what leaders pay attention to. For example, followers of different leaders, followers are lovers of different leaders or parties. They have an image of their leader. They have made an image of their leader in their mind. They have made an image of their party. So they believe that their party is very good, their manifesto is good, their agenda is good, they believe their leader is very good, very honest, very sincere about the country. And their image of the other party, the opponent party and the opponent leader, that is negative, usually negative. They think the other leaders, they are not as sincere as my leader is. Their party is not as good as my party is. Okay? And this image influences their future process of information. So any information which contradicts this image is usually ignored. Do you understand this? When a piece of information comes to that particular follower or lover of that leader or party, they do not process, usually they do not process this neutrally as a neutral person. No. They process as the follower of that leader and party. If the information goes against the leader and the party, usually it is ignored. If the information coming in supports their leader and their party, usually it is adopted and it is propagated further. Similarly, if some information is coming against another leader, the opponent party, usually we buy it. People buy it. Okay? They do not bother whether the information is correct or not, because it favors their image. It supports their image of that particular opponent leader and party. So people usually buy it. They like it. They favor it. And they propagate it through social media, WhatsApp messages, Facebook posts like this. and short videos. All this is happening. So, being students of science and being students of political science, we need to understand it properly. How we are biased, how we are biased when we process political information about our leaders, our party, and about other leaders and other parties. Similarly, about our country and about other countries. Sometimes patriotism overwhelms us and we tend to believe something which is not correct, but it goes against the enemy. It favors our country. So it is not scientific. Okay, being a patriotic Pakistani, it may be okay, but being a political scientist, we need to understand which piece of information is reliable, neutral, objective, and which is not. Okay, these filters decide what leaders pay attention to. They decide what leaders ignore. They decide how leaders understand signals, how leaders understand information, and they decide how leaders understand events. All incoming information passes through these filters. So they are different filters. There are different filters. The filters personalize and bias the leader's view of the outside world. So since the leaders they have their own filters, so sometimes their image of other leaders, other countries is biased due to those filters, and their image is highly personalized. So different leaders react differently to the same international challenges. Their reaction depends on the content of their personal images. Let me give you an example. General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev saw the Soviet Union's decline in the 1980s. Mikhail Gorbachev, he became the president of the USSR. First, he was the general secretary of the Communist Party, and then he was the president of the United Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR. He saw the Soviet Union's decline in the 1980s. He reacted very differently from the ailing Leonid Brezhnev. So before him, Brezhnev was the president of the USSR. So Brezhnev has a different view of how USSR was changing, and Gorbachev he had a different image how USSR was changing. Gorbachev preferred internal reform and relaxing international tensions. What did he prefer? Gorbachev, he preferred internal reform and relaxing international tensions. His predecessors preferred internal repression and taking risks abroad. Predecessors, including Brezhnev, Stalin, Lenin, Khrushchev, they were the previous presidents of the USSR. So their policy internally was repression. Their laws were very harsh. Like, Taliban, some of their laws are like them, very harsh. And externally, they were very aggressive. They would launch wars. They also invaded Afghanistan. They occupied many countries in Eastern Europe. So they occupied Central Asia. So they were aggressors. They were tough in their foreign policy. Their previous presidents of the USSR. But Gorbachev, he looked at it differently. So he preferred internal reform and releasing international tension. Here is another example. President Ronald Reagan had strong beliefs about the Soviet Union. Ronald Reagan was the president of the United States of America. He had strong beliefs. He had some strong image about the Soviet Union, the USSR. He believed the Soviet Union was illegitimate and expansionist. The Soviet Union was illegitimate. Its government was not legitimate in Reagan's view. And it was expansionist. It was expanding. It was attacking other countries and occupying them. He believed mutually assured destruction was inadequate and even immoral. Mutually assured destruction. Do you know this? Do you understand this? Mutually assured destruction? Mutually assured destruction is a nuclear doctrine. America became a nuclear power, during the Second World War. And after some years, Soviet Union also became a nuclear power. It made atomic weapons, nuclear weapons. Now, both of them were afraid of each other. Both of them were afraid of a nuclear war. What will happen if a nuclear war takes place between the two superpowers? Both will be destroyed. Okay, so they did not like it happen. Now they negotiated with each other how to avoid that nuclear war, and they came up with this nuclear doctrine. The philosophy was behind this doctrine was that no country, no superpower should be able to destroy the other one-sidedly. No superpower should be able to destroy the opponent and stay safe. It should not be possible. If one power knows that suddenly it can launch nuclear attacks against the other and destroy it, and still it will stay safe, then it may think to do so. Getting the point? You are getting the point? If one country, if one superpower knows that if it can destroy the opponent and can stay safe, so it means it can it can decide to destroy the opponent by launching nuclear attacks. But if both powers know that they cannot do this, if one will attack, it will also be attacked. If it destroys the opponent, it will also be destroyed. Then no one will attack each other. No one will launch a nuclear attack against each other. Getting the point? Are you getting it? So it was called the doctrine of mutually assured destruction. Mutually assured destruction. So what did they do to make it, to implement this doctrine? They came up with a strategy of the second strike. For example, country A, it attacks the other with atomic bombs. The second country must be able to retaliate. It must be able to retaliate. It was a theory of retaliation. So, in order to retain that capability, they put the nuclear weapons in trains, and the trains would continuously move so that they cannot be destroyed. And they also put nuclear weapons on the submarines. You know submarines? they move under the ocean, under the water, submarines. Both Soviet Union and United States of America, both of them, they also put some atom bombs, atomic bombs in submarines, and those submarines would continuously move under the ocean so that the opponent cannot destroy all of them at once. Third, it was called triad. It had three legs. First was the trains, second was the submarines, third was the fighter jets, aeroplanes. They put some of the nuclear bombs on aeroplanes, and one set of aeroplanes would always be in the air. Some of the atom bombs of the United States of America and the USSR while every moment were in the air, which could not be destroyed all at once. Some were moving in the trains, so all of them could not be destroyed at once. And some of the atom bombs were moving in the submarines under the oceans. So all these submarines, all the aircrafts, all the trains which were moving with atomic bombs could not be destroyed at once. This is how they assured mutual destruction. Now, the USSR and the United States, they know if they attack the opponent with the nuclear weapons, with the atom bombs, they will also be attacked. So it will deter them to launch an attack against the other. It was the doctrine of mutually assured destruction. So Ronald Reagan believed mutually assured destruction was inadequate and even immoral. He believed past nuclear arms treaties weakened US national security. Past nuclear arms treaties weakened United States national security. So during his first term, the Reagan administration did not follow past policies which were made and implemented by the previous presidents. Nixon, Ford, and Carter all pursued strategic arms control talks with the Soviet Union. So Nixon, Ford, and Carter were also presidents of the United States. They all pursued strategic arms control talks with the Soviet Union. Reagan did not follow that course. Ronald Reagan did not follow that course. A leader's personality and character also matter. A leader's personality and character. Number one, we have discussed leaders' images, their political beliefs and perceptions. They are important, they matter. Secondly, leaders' personality and character, it also matters in decision making, in foreign policy making. Some powerful leaders have had a huge impact on their state's choices. Some powerful leaders have had a huge impact on their state's choices. Daniel L. Byman and Kenneth M. Pollack gave several examples. They are the authors. They are the authors. They mention Otto von Bismarck. Bismarck was a European leader, I think in Germany. He was a German leader, Bismarck. They mention Kaiser William II. I think he is also a German leader. They mention Adolf Hitler. Hitler is also German. They mention Saddam Hussein. All of you know him. Studies show that some leaders are more willing to take risks. Studies show that some leaders are more willing to take risks. Others are more afraid of taking risks. Other leaders, they do not want to take huge risks. Philip B.K. Potter found that a leader's age and experience also matter. A leader's age and experience. It also matters in decision making, in foreign policy making. They affect whether a leader will start a crisis. The age affects, and the experience affects whether a leader will start a crisis or not. So, to understand a state's foreign policy choices, we should study its leaders. The neoclassical realist theorists, they say if we want to understand a state's foreign policy choices, we should study its leaders. We should look at their character and psychological makeup. What is their character? What is their psyche? These are critical intervening variables. They shape how leaders respond to systemic pressures. Here is an example from history. Alexander L. George and Juliet George studied President Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson was also President of the United States. At the 1919 Paris Peace Conference, Wilson had a very rigid negotiating stance. Woodrow Wilson had a very rigid, very hard, which is not flexible, negotiating stance. Later, he could not build a domestic coalition. Woodrow Wilson could not build an American coalition. He failed to get Senate ratification of the Treaty of Versailles. Treaty of Versailles is a famous treaty, and American Senate did not ratify it, and also Woodrow Wilson failed in it. This meant the United States did not join the League of Nations. So American Senate did not allow America to join League of Nations, and America did not join it. The Georges explained Wilson's behavior using his childhood. The authors explain Wilson's behavior focusing on his childhood. They focused especially on his relationship with his perfectionist father. Wilson's father was perfectionist, and they thought Wilson was also perfectionist. He wanted to have a good world, a democratic world, a peaceful world where there's no war, where human rights are respected, where democracy flourishes, all that. So Wilsonian idealism is very famous. Wilson is famous for his idealism, for his perfectionism. Here is another example. Doris Kearns studied President Lyndon Johnson's Vietnam policy. Lyndon Johnson was also American president. Johnson was unwilling to accept defeat. America was fighting a war against Vietnam, and Lyndon Johnson did not want to accept defeat. And the war continued for 20 years, 19, 20 years in Vietnam. Kearns explained this using his character. His character came from his upbringing and his relationship with his parents. A leader's operational codes also affect foreign policy responses. Nathan Leeds, Alexander George, and Oli Holsti developed this idea. They say each leader has an operational code. The operational code has a set of master beliefs. Master beliefs. Some are general beliefs, some are master beliefs. These beliefs help the leader understand incoming information. They also guide the leader in making decisions. Leaders hold on to these master beliefs very tightly. They hold on to these beliefs very tightly, master beliefs. They are very reluctant to change them. Leaders do not want to change their master beliefs. Three types of cognitions play a special role in shaping master beliefs. The first is philosophical beliefs about politics. The second is instrumental beliefs about which strategies work best. The first is philosophical beliefs. The second is instrumental beliefs. The third is images of one's enemy and oneself. Images of oneself and images of enemy. Scholars have used the operational code to explain many leaders' decisions. For example, US Presidents Lyndon B. Johnson and Bill Clinton, Secretaries of State John Foster Dulles and Henry Kissinger, they were the foreign ministers of the United States, Secretaries of State, and British Prime Minister Tony Blair. These operational codes affect how systemic stimuli are processed. A lot of neoclassical realist scholarship uses perceptual variables. Perceptual variables. These variables affect how leaders see the balance of power. They also affect how leaders see future power trends. Future power trends. How power is shifting. How power is increasing or decreasing. Neoclassical realists make an important distinction. They distinguish between the actual or real distribution of power and elites' perceptions of the balance of power. William Wolford studied elite perceptions of power during the Cold War. He looked at how these perceptions shaped Soviet American competition. He says it is very hard for leaders to measure aggregate power. Aggregate power, total power of a country. It is called aggregate power. So it is hard to measure. We cannot be sure what is the total power of a country. So leaders break power down into four aspects. It is the theory of power. Theory of power. Leaders break power down into four aspects. The first aspect of the power is the elements of power. Elements. What are the elements of power? This is what people think power is. The second is the distribution of power. How power is distributed. This is how the state compares to other great powers. How much power a country has with respect to the great powers. The third is the mechanics of power. Mechanics. How power is increased or decreased, how power works. These are the mechanics of power. This is how the balance of power actually works, how power exerts itself. The fourth is prestige. More powerful countries have more prestige. Okay? This is the state's relative status and influence in international politics. Prestige. Prestige is the state's relative status and influence in international politics. And this prestige increases sometimes it decreases. After the Indo-Pak War in 2025, Pakistan prestige has increased at the international stage. Indian prestige has suffered due to the loss. Wolford found that Soviet and American leaders emphasized different things. Soviet leaders focused on military capabilities. American leaders stressed economic and organizational resources. Economic resources and organizational resources. Jeffrey Taliaferro also studies how leaders think about power. One is what is the image of power, and the other is how leaders think about the power. He found that leaders do not accept losses easily. Leaders do not accept the losses. The first is they do not want to accept defeat. Second, they do not want to accept loss. They do not see losses in relative power, status, or prestige as sunk costs. Instead, leaders often keep investing in failed foreign interventions. Although American invasion of Vietnam, it was a failed policy, it was a wrong policy, America could not win it. But they did not want to accept defeat and they continued the war. Secondly, they did not want to accept the losses they suffered in the Vietnam War and still they continued the war. So, leaders often keep investing in failed foreign interventions. They even double down to try to recover past losses. So they even increase the strength. They launch more attacks. They intensify the war to recover past losses because they do not want to accept the loss. And this is what happens in gambling. You know, gambling. This is what happens in gambling. People are ruined financially. Gamblers, most of the gamblers, they are financially destroyed because they do not want to accept the loss, and in order to recover the previous loss, they suffer more loss. Okay, they put more money into gambling, and they lose it. And to recover that loss, they put more money, and then they start selling their home appliances, their furniture, their home appliances, and they put money in the gambling and they lose it. And this is how they become the absolute losers and they destroy their life. So, gambling is not recommended. Gambling is not recommended. I should advise all of you never indulge in gambling. It is destructive. They do this because they are loss averse. Loss. Leaders are loss averse. They do not want to accept loss. Loss aversion leads them to take risky strategies. So, in fact, this is what happened in Indo-Pakistan case. In Balakot, several years back, they lost a jet fighter. Abhinandan's aeroplane was destroyed. In order to recover that loss, Narendra Modi bought Rafales from France to recover that loss, and again attacked Pakistan, and ultimately he also lost Rafales. It is because the leaders are loss averse. They do not want to accept the loss. Now, there's another question, an interesting question. Now, Narendra Modi has suffered loss twice. Once in Balakot, a second, the S-400 and Rafale fighter jets. Now, using this theory, predict. We should predict what Narendra Modi will think about these two losses, huge losses, and what foreign policy towards Pakistan in future he is going to make. This is how theory helps us predicting about the future. Okay, so you keep thinking on it. After this, completing this presentation, I will ask you, what is going to be the next Indian move with regard to this? Okay. Okay, loss aversion leads them to take risky strategies. The result can be self-defeating military and diplomatic engagement. They waste resources in inconsequential places. In fact, a few days back I have watched a short video. In that video, Indian air chief of Indian Air Force, he was saying, who will investigate who made the policy to buy old Rafales. Rafale technology is too old, decades old, and who can dare in India to ask for investigating into the decision of purchasing Rafales? So, in his view, that was a bad decision. So, a lot of finance was lost, Indian finance, and a lot of Indian prestige was lost. They waste resources in inconsequential places. Aaron Friedberg also studies how leaders measure power. How leaders measure power. He looks at how they adjust to shifts in the distribution of power. He looks at how leaders adjust to shifts in the distribution of power. Friedberg questions the determinism of structural realism. Friedberg questions the determinism of structural realism. Structural realism moves directly from international structure to state behavior. Structural realism moves directly from international structure to state behavior. Friedberg says this has limited explanatory and predictive power. The key point of his argument is this: adaptation to shifts in power is often delayed. Adaptation to shifts in power is often delayed. It comes in discrete chunks. It is not continuous adaptation and updating. Melvin Leffler studied the so-called wise men in the Truman administration. He looked at how they defined American national security. This was during the early years of the Cold War. For Leffler, perceptions really mattered. Perceptions really mattered. It was the perceptions of American policymakers that mattered, not the real or actual distribution of power. Senior officials understood Soviet weaknesses and vulnerabilities. They understood the importance of rebuilding Germany and Japan. They understood the importance of the Eurasian landmass. They wanted to keep it out of the control of any great power adversary. But these same officials also exaggerated the dangers in Europe. They saw Europe as more perilous than structural imperatives required. They also exaggerated the leverage of the Kremlin. Kremlin is the capital of the Soviet Union. It is in Moscow. Kremlin is an area in Moscow where central offices of the Russian government are located. It is called Kremlin. Hall Brands makes a similar point. He says that during the Cold War, the United States formulated its grand strategy. Contradictory information was either ignored or twisted. Contradictory information was either ignored or twisted. It was twisted to fit existing explanations. Contradictory information which did not suit their existing explanations, it was either ignored or it was twisted to fit into the existing explanations by the American foreign policy executives. Thank you.